and welcome to the City of Brisbane Complete Streets Safety Committee meeting for December 7th, 2022. This meeting is compliant with the Governor's Executive Order N-29-20 issued on March 17th, 2020, allowing for deviation of teleconference rules required by the Brown Act. The purpose of this is to provide the safest environment for staff, committee members, and the public while allowing for public participation. The public may participate via a Zoom web link and/or by phone or by using remote public comment options. The committee may take action on any item listed in the agenda. Public meeting videos. Members of the public may view the Complete Street Safety Committee meeting by logging onto the Zoom meeting listed below. Complete Street Safety Committee meetings can also be viewed live and/or on demand via the city's YouTube channel at www.youtube.com/Brisbane CA or on Comcast Channel 27. Archived videos can be replayed at the city's website, http://brisbane.brisbaneca.org/meeting. Joined by Zoom. Topic: Complete Street Safety Committee meeting. Time: December 7th, 2022, 6:30 p.m. Pacific Time, U.S. and Canada. www.brisbanecA.org/CSSC-Zoom. Meeting ID is 976-0955-7422, and the passcode is 747389. You can also join by phone by calling 1-669-900-9128. The meeting ID is 0955-7422. To address the committee. When an item you are interested in appears on the agenda, you may address the committee at that time. If the matter you are interested in is not on the committee's agenda, but is a matter that is within the committee's subject matter jurisdiction, you may address it under public comment. Remote public comment. Meeting participants are encouraged to submit public comments in writing in advance of the meeting. The following email will be monitored during the meeting, and public comments received will be read into the record during oral communication or during an item. That email is tsantoyo@ci.brisbane.ca.us. Special assistant. If you need special assistance to participate in this meeting, please contact Tomas Santoyo at tsantoyo@brisbaneca.org or at telephone 415-508-2100. Notification in advance of the meeting will enable the city to make reasonable arrangements to ensure accessibility to this meeting. Okay. I call our meeting to order. If we could have roll call, please.
Just have to write down the names, but we'll start with Christian Cabrera.
Present.
Linda Detmer. Oh, you're on mute.
Hello, sorry I'm late.
Oh,
Just
we have
in time,
another.
actually.
Greg.
Linda,
Greg.
Linda Detmer, I can't hear you.
Linda, you're on mute. She's here. Okay. She's waving.
You don't know how to get off mute. We're going to need you later.
Maybe she's having maybe she's sick and having trouble talking at the moment.
No, it's her mute. Her mute's on
I know.
to adopt minutes and all that. Gregory Strecker. We're doing roll call.
Oh, aye, here.
Patrick Tainter.
Here.
I'm here.
Linda, thank you.
Hey, Linda.
And Darius
Figured it out.
Wozniak is
Linda and
not
Greg,
present.
thank you for making it at the last minute. Appreciate that. Okay. We have a quorum, so let's continue onward with the meeting then. Could I have a motion to adopt the agenda that we have before us?
Sure, I'll make that
Anyone?
motion.
A
I'll make
motion to adopt.
Thank you. A second?
second.
Okay. Roll call then
Roll
on
call.
adoption of the agenda.
Cabrera,
Present. Aye.
Detmer,
Yes, aye.
Strecker,
Aye.
Tainter,
Aye.
and Wozniak not here.
Okay, the agenda is adopted. Do we have anyone, do we have any oral communication from the public? Is there anyone present, or are there any written communications submitted?
No oral communications or emails thus far.
Okay. Let's move on then. I'd like to have a motion to approve the minutes of our last meeting, November 2nd.
Note for the record that Darius Wozniak just joined.
Oh,
Also?
okay.
Sorry I'm late.
Thank you, Darius.
It was a slow start today, so.
I'll make a motion to adopt the minutes.
I'll second that. I did read through them.
Could we have roll call, please?
Cabrera,
Aye.
Detmer,
Aye.
Strecker,
Aye.
Tainter,
Aye.
and Wozniak.
Aye.
Righty.
Okay, the minutes are adopted. Approved. I would like to say I thought the minutes were really terrific. I don't know how much time everyone had to be able to read through them, but I thought they were exceptionally good this time. So Karen and Tomas, thank you. That was a very detailed capture of our discussion last meeting.
I agree. It's excellent.
Yeah. Okay. Let's move on then to the subject at hand, which is continuing our investigation of a residential parking permit program for Central Brisbane. And let me do just a real quick recap where we kind of are. And at this time, Tomas, could you put up that working topic list we've had on screen? Yes. Okay. So we've come to consensus on some of the major items, and we have some important but less major items that need to be discussed over the next few meetings and decided. The first item that we have come to a consensus on is that the parking permit program will apply to Central Brisbane, or what we call Old Town, as one single unit. That was the first item that we agreed on. The second item we agreed on is that each residential unit would receive 2 permits with some flexibility. The third, and then in addition to that, if on the property there was a city permitted ADU unit, that ADU would receive its own single parking permit. The third item we have agreed on is that there will be a guest parking program. We haven't worked out the details of that yet, but that's something that I want to talk about tonight. Additionally, tonight, I would like us to talk about, in a general sense, cost structure or pricing structure, how we might, if there will be charges, and if so, how that might be, not the specific numbers, but at least a general guideline for that we could send on to council. And then the hours of operation, that it will be in effect all day, at night, certain hours, so forth. And then that keys into enforcement. And then finally, the final item is to discuss whether we include visitation or not. So I guess where I'd like to start tonight is looking at hours of okay, no, let's go right on what we have here on screen. Let's start with guest parking, since we discussed that at the last meeting, but we did not reach a consensus. The feeling is that we'll have a guest parking permit program, but that does have the potential for a loophole if it is extremely lenient. On the other hand, we do not want to be so restrictive that it makes it difficult for people to have visitors, whether for a few days visiting or for a night and so forth. So if we could start our discussion on thoughts on a guest permit program now, that would be great. Any thoughts? Anybody want to start off on that?
Karen had her hand up.
Who did? Oh, Karen.
Karen.
Okay,
Karen.
yes.
Well, and I wanted to, I guess I'm asking the chair when you would like an update on the information that staff got since the last meeting. So we went away with some direction to look into the services that were available and the costs of those and what's possible under their structure. I don't know if it has to be before guest parking, but you might have an idea in mind of when to get into that. But it does play into at least the cost part and what's possible.
Yeah.
We didn't talk in great detail about guest parking, but it is possible to have guest parking permits. And if you want to talk about guest parking first, I have one specific comment. I had the benefit of talking directly to Commander Garcia today for a couple of minutes, and we talked about whether your permit structure, your recommendation would be like San Francisco's, where if you don't have a permit, you can park for 2 hours in the zone, or whether you cannot park at all unless you have a guest parking permit. So I think that would affect how many you wanted to issue and for what length of time.
Okay, so why don't we reach a consensus on that first? I think last month when we were discussing this, we were all assuming that there would be a 2-hour allowable period of parking. And that, at least as I looked back through the minutes and watched the video, that was kind of our thinking at that time. Any thoughts on that? Do we want to allow 2 hours before a permit? Yes, Linda?
I watched the video and read everything. I also thought the minutes were great. One of the things that I have to question is short-term versus long-term guest parking. Sometimes when my family comes, it's from across the country and they stay more than a 2-hour period. So yeah, I'm wondering if we need to separate long-term to short-term and maybe get long-term by request, or anybody has any ideas. The short-term, I haven't really thought that through yet, but I just wanted to mention that.
Okay. This is all kind of a chicken and an egg problem, because it also factors into when is this in effect. And our thoughts last month were it would be in the overnight period of time, not during the daylight hours. What time it started, we did not agree on, but it starts in the evening and would continue overnight. And so I think guest parking would allow that person to park overnight, just a default permit would allow them to park overnight. That would be my thought. And a city that we lived in outside of Chicago had this kind of, there was no street parking allowed. All the houses had alleys behind because they were so old. And so residents always parked behind. And because of snow removal, there was just no street parking allowed in front of the house. And that made it very easy to enforce, at least overnight street parking. And what you did was, if you had guests, you would call up the police department and say, this was 25 years ago. There was no internet system, registration system. You would call up the police department, give them the license number and say, this car will be here for tonight, days, and they would mark it, and on their patrols, they knew that was a car that was acceptable to be parked on the street. That's kind of how I envisioned it to work. I think we need an upper limit. Maybe it's 1 week and you have to renew it or something. Any thoughts on that, committee?
I like the idea.
Okay. I'll start calling on folks.
You know, I was going to comment. I also like the idea. I think for me, it comes down again to kind of enforcement of it, which is maybe the same chicken and egg issue we talked about earlier. Is how do we enforce it in order to make sure that those limits are, you know, meaningful? So I'd be curious to hear if there's some updates maybe on that, or maybe, you know, but otherwise, I think, yeah, I agree there should be flexibility and some sort of, I mean, yeah, ideally your system sounds great, you know, for backdiving that works great, and where you just call in the police station or maybe online registering to say, hey, this is a guest. There should be an upper limit. I agree. Yeah, I'm in favor.
And one step further, if we online registered, maybe we can get something emailed that we could print out for that guest.
Oh, like a temporary permit.
Yeah.
Christian?
Yeah, so just wanted to make sure I understood the introduction of today's meeting, to put things into perspective. So what the topics that are still pending for us to process are the guest parking, right? The cost structure.
Yes.
And enforcement. So one of the things I think it might influence what we're talking about now, if we decide what route to go in terms of enforcement, if it's going to be done by by the city police force, or if we're going to subcontract it, then we're going to have different way of, maybe based on their technology or capacity, how to handle guest parking. But in terms of, so that's one comment, I guess. And the other one is, do we have a deadline in terms of when do we need to submit this for the city? I hope to put you on the spot, but before we continue, I just wanted to put that out there.
Okay, good. I thought I'd sent a message to everyone, but let me put it out. So we initially had committed to council that we would have been finished last month, and obviously that did not come to pass. This is much more complex than I think we anticipated, and I've spoken with the mayor, and committed to her that we should be able to send a recommendation to council in February. So my thinking is that if we can wrap up things between this meeting and our January meeting, that gives us the February meeting to do a final review of everything, that it could then go to council. I imagine they meet twice in the month of February. But at whatever meeting, the first meeting of the month or the second meeting of the month.
So, so essentially, we have today's and January meeting to come up with something. Then,
Right. So, we don't have to work on the details of site contractor or administered by Brisbane Police. I think those are decisions that are best left to the staff, city staff, as well in consultation with council or advising council. Because I think that's this expertise we do not have, as well as a consultation with Brisbane Police Department, since if they're the ones that do it, they're the ones that would have to do it. They have all of them have much more experience in this than we do. I think our task from the city is to sketch out the larger over the umbrella policies that kind of just overarching on the entire program. And then the details of implementation would be between staff and Brisbane Police working together, and then that final decision out of council. So at this point, I think council is asking the question of if the city were to do a parking permit program, what do we think would be the best way to implement that in terms of policies and general structure? And then if council says, yes, we want to go ahead with this, then I think staff and the Brisbane Police Department would get involved in looking at the very detailed work of how it would actually be implemented, whether by Brisbane Police or by an outside contractor. If an outside contractor, how much does it cost? How often do they come by? So on and so forth. So I don't think we have to work on those particular issues as a committee. I think we're kind of more at a policy level recommendation. Does that make sense?
yeah, no, that's a great clarification because in that sense, we maybe the cost structure might not even be something that we should give a priority to.
No, exactly right. Except from the sense of do we think it should cover? I think we should make a recommendation, or it's within our purview to give a recommendation if we want to. Should it cover the costs? Should it not cover the costs? Should we make allocations for less advantaged people? Those kinds of questions. Should we have a phase-in period where it's free? That kind of thing. I think those kind of recommendations we could make, and then it's up to council to decide how they would finally do it. Linda?
Pat, I just want to echo what you said. And I don't know if you recall, but we were visited by the mayor at one point who said, it's up to them to figure out the cost. It's up to us to just come in with the idea that it will work. And if they can get it implemented, they will. And they may send it back to us for further study. But at this point, we're just doing the outline, as you said. And I don't think we need to get into the minutia very much, but there will be questions like the guest permits and how we suggest they work or give them a couple of alternatives. Enforcement, I think we should just leave that up to the council completely because they're going to be checking costs. So
yes, I agree. Thank you for pointing that out because I had forgotten that.
Yes,
that's a good point.
So I'll give you my opinion in terms of guest, especially for guest parking. I would suggest that you have like one or two permit parking for guests, and then you could buy those for either you could buy them right away, but then whenever you're going to do an exchange, there might be some sort of fee involved so people don't abuse them, and some sort of check and balance to make sure that if you're going to get if you're going to change one, if you have two guest parking permit, and then you're going to replace one or swap it with another one, there will be a process how to do that so there's no confusion on the other vehicle stays on the system. And
Okay.
so what I was saying is in terms of if you do that with a contract versus the Brisbane City police force, there will be different way of handling that. Perhaps a contract will have more of a technological advanced way of doing that versus a city the police force in Brisbane. It will be more of administrator, like you were saying, maybe send an email, and then such and such vehicle will be get out of the system. And of course, you have to have some sort of a fee so people don't get the habit of just like changing that all the time.
Hmm. Okay. Thank you. Let me clarify. When you say that one or two, you mean one or two would be free, and after that, they would have to pay for more, or pay right up front?
No, I think that originally, if I recall correctly, that the two, standard or regular parking permit would be free because we went into the logic of if you have a house, you obviously you could park up to 2 cars in front of it because of your parking entrance garage and so forth, and then additional ones I don't recall if we ended up in you could get 2 more or 3 more additional ones, but you have to pay. In terms of guest parking, I think that should be at least one, perhaps one free, and then the other one you will need to pay.
Okay.
So
Okay.
that's my opinion.
All right. Darius or Greg, do you have any thoughts on guest parking?
I think kind of what we talked about. I kind of agree with what you guys are talking about. I think a couple guest parking is a good thing to have. We just need to make sure that the parking permits that however they are given are not easily forgeable as well. That might be something to look at. But that might be something else related to how we dole out the guest parking.
Okay. Thank you. So one of the things, yes.
Just a thought that after hearing Gregory, I'm wondering if we should have some consideration towards one permanent guest parking permit that can only be used a certain number of hours, something like that, to alleviate, somebody coming over for an hour or two from out of town.
Oh, that's an interesting idea. So for instance, instead of being good for overnight, say it would be good to, I don't know, till 11 p.m. or 12 p.m. or something like that, you mean?
I mean,
Okay.
so one way to also look at it, you might have two conditions, right? If you have an event, you're going to have guests coming to your event, or if you have some sort of consistent person that needs a parking that visits you and so forth, that might be another condition. Perhaps we could use like a sticker that the handicapped people use, and then you could give them to the household, and then they could just say, come get the sticker. That way, your car is going to be safe in terms of parking. But that's
Okay.
That's one thought. But also in general, obviously, if you have a gather, there might be some areas where they could be looked at as guest parking. I don't know.
You mean specific parts of town or something?
Yeah.
Yeah.
They could be shuttered down or something.
Yeah. Well, South Hill Drive is dry empty at night, and there's tons of parking over there.
We need a shuttle from there to be.
Yeah. The commute.org doesn't run at night. Otherwise, they do run along that. All right. I'm understanding our guest, what we might recommend guest parking. We should have,
I think Karen has her hand up.
Well, why don't you summarize what everybody said, and then I'll jump in with my thoughts, because I missed a little bit of it for a second.
so, flexible. And I think we've had the idea put out of each household would get a permanent guest parking permit assigned to them, but that would be limited in time so that they could have people come over for dinner or whatever, or late into the evening. And they would get one per household, and that might be good until, say, 11 p.m. or midnight, something like that. And then they could then, if they needed guest parking for overnight parking, they would then go however we are set up, whether it's a service company or Brisbane Police, and they could get an additional permit. And the first one would be at no cost. That would be good for 7 days of overnight parking that they could renew, but we need to put a limit on how many times they can renew it. If they needed more than one overnight parking permit, we would start to assess a fee for that. So to discourage excessive use of this program. Am I summarizing where we're at, everybody? Is that,
I think
did
so.
I capture us accurately? Okay. Corrections?
I think you got it.
Okay.
Pat.
Okay. Karen, what are your,
Yeah, that seems a bit complicated, but also I guess I wanted to say I don't know if the goal is to accommodate everybody's possible situation when someone comes to visit them. Like maybe, there isn't enough space for all the cars that
Mhm.
people want to park in town. So, and this program is somewhat going to restrict that in the concept that you guys have come up with, where a household has two, every address has two, and if you have an ADU, one more. If you have one guest parking that can be used every day of the year, you've essentially added one per household. So, and some of the background I think is relevant because you guys are talking about cost without having any. We have some cost information now, so I would like to share it.
Okay.
When what I was going to say about having the extra. So we drew a line around, and I think Patrick, you and I emailed a little bit about this, around the area that we're talking about, because there's no public parking on the backside of San Bruno. There's no public parking, or we're not dealing with the mobile home park, so there's no parking on Bayshore other than that, really. So we're not dealing with those areas and the couple private streets that go up the upper hillside. So we drew a line around that, and we found 14 to 1,500 households, and 100 of those have
Okay.
ADUs. So if it's 1,500, that's two per 3,000, 3,100 permits that would be allowed to be given out. So some people maybe won't want two per household. I don't know. We're not absolutely sure, but it's probably in that ballpark. So we were able to make contact with the company that would manage the permit issuance. South San Francisco uses them. I think San Bruno is going to use them, and they have, various accounts all over the country. And they were very enthusiastic to tell us about their product. And I was kind of like, we just want the high level stuff at this point. How do you do it? How much does it cost? So they can issue a permit depending on whether someone pays with credit card and which type of permit we want to use, the options being hang tags, stickers, or you can do license plate readers where it's all digital and you don't even need a document. And so that costs like $15 to $20 per permit, which actually I thought was pretty good because, if you're in San Francisco, they charge maybe around $300 to get a permit. So that's pretty reasonable. They have a one-time startup fee of $5,000 to get your program into their system. So from the staff perspective, it was feeling like maybe if you were asking me, maybe council funds that first startup, but then those permit fees get passed on to the users. We also were able to, luckily, took a little effort, make contact with a company that does enforcement, and they do enforcement right now in San Mateo. They also do like parking lot ticketing, but they also do street parking. And because we were very interested in knowing that they could do the overnight hours that you guys want, where the program starts at 8 or 10 p.m., depending on whether there's a 2-hour window where you can park without a permit or whether you absolutely have to have one to be able to park at all. And they said they'd have to give us a person. They don't have someone doing overnight, so it'd be one full-time body and all of their, benefits. And they could do license plate reading also. They could do any form. And that was costing around $40 to $45 per permit, because we need one full-time person. And I said 7 days a week because I just wanted to get
Yeah.
the higher level of estimate.
Quick,
So that-
quick question is
Karen,
this
a
fee
question?
Good question.
Go ahead.
Karen, is this fee per month or annually?
Right.
per year.
Oh, per year. So that's
Per
pretty
year.
good.
Oh,
Pretty reasonable. So from staff's perspective, if we put on, there's going to be some management and coordination on our part. I'm going to have to figure out what the program does and how much staff time, but we're maybe in the ballpark of $100 for a permit per year, which is not terrible as the cost, whether it be council totally funds it or people have to pay for it. And we also looked into, and Tomas sent around the information. It wasn't real specific, but the PG&E CARES program applies to utility billing. So if you qualify on an income basis, you get a discount on your water and sewer bill. We could apply that also to these permits. So hypothetically, if the fee were $100, then if you qualify for that program, maybe your fee is only $70. I don't know. Maybe it's half. I'm not sure. So there's a framework, and these services would really fill this gap that, in a small city, it's a real specialized thing, and they're not big enough to assign a person completely to it.
right.
So I don't know if this would be a good time if Mario's still available, but when I had the opportunity to speak to him a little bit, he was very supportive of license plate reading as a way to issue these permits. So I don't know if you want to comment on that, Mario, or if you have.
I am. So there's a looming issue of marking vehicles and tagging vehicles, let's say like chocolate vehicles. There is I don't know if it's decided yet, but there's a court case that says that's a Fourth Amendment issue. I haven't dove into that. So by license plate reading, it's a lot more accurate. And it's a lot faster, as long as there's a conduit for people that without access to computers to be able to call into the service and say, hey, I have guest parking tonight, this is the license plate, and someone actually inputs that, because not everybody has access to personal computers or their phones. So I think in terms of enforcement and tracking, the portion where the license plate reader would be much better.
Linda?
I think that really simplifies things. I've been sitting here thinking we need to try to cover all these angles, but it's feeling really imposing for some reason, and too big and too difficult to present to an entire community. Excuse me. I really like the idea of license plate readers, which is great. We just need a form of registration and a call-in guest permit thing with a no fee or a fee attached, depending on how long the person's staying. Maybe not even that. I think we need to kind of back up just a little bit and simplify this whole process. It's feeling overwhelming right now. I mean, basically, the 2 parking permits, I'm only speaking of guest parking. Everything prior to that, I am in agreement with. But the gas parking is feeling a little bit overwhelming. I mean, does anybody
Yeah,
else?
yeah, there was a bit
It
of
can get very
complication to it.
complicated.
And I also wanted to add the comment that if you have an increasing fee for more of them, you know, maybe it's a social justice issue. Maybe only people can afford it are doing guest parking, and that's not really what we're trying to do. You know, I did ask. I want to follow up on the license plate reader. I didn't understand really well how they work, and I said, what if cars are parked really close together? Because we have that in this city, and they're like, they can read them. They can read them even if they're almost touching.
All right.
Okay, great.
Let me, go ahead. Who was that?
So yeah,
Christian?
that was me. Yeah. So Karen, so you started with, you know, sort of citing some general statistics of the population, or I guess your, you know, or more or less what the capacity that we're going to be anticipating in terms of cars. So you're looking at what, 3,500 cars more or less?
I said 3,100. If everyone uses every permit available, you know, applies for and gets every permit available to them.
One of the things we have been talking about is there's a way of getting some rough estimate in terms of the streets of Brisbane. What is their capacity? If you're saying, let's say, you know, we're just talking, we're just thinking out loud in a sense. We don't have like hard way of knowing this, but I think it's good to talk about it and have some sense, and perhaps we could develop a method and get more data that is more assertive. But let's say if you're looking at 3,100 cars, and the average length of a car is what, I don't know, like 12 feet. And then if you count the parking, the capacity of all the streets on parking, you know, that will give us a sense where, you know, if we're like trying the money or we're off, or why not. So that would be another data point to get a more, you know, sense of. And then that will probably, you know, inform us how to go about guest parking or some other or issue more parking per household or diminish it.
Let me comment on that. I think that's getting really deep into the details. That's beyond what our charge is from council. You know, if you look at the city today, car eventually gets parked somewhere or close to it. It's like musical chairs. Few people at the end of the day end up probably having to park far away from their home, their destination. But at the end of the day, everybody gets parked. So even though it's a really big hassle, and we've been told there are people who have umpteen numbers of cars, and there are likely some people parking and taking Uber to the airport parking on our streets and taking Uber to the airport. That consumes parking. We really don't need to worry about how many cars there are in Brisbane and how many parking places there are, because right now it kind of works. Painful, but it does work. This program is to the idea is to take some of that pain out by, say, making it hard for airport just Uber people to park on our streets for 4 or 5 days, or somebody who has 10 cars to park them all in front of their, you know, on their block or something like that. That's kind of the idea. I don't think we need to dive into how many cars and how many parking spaces there are, because right now it all kind of balances out. All we want to do is try and create a program that tips the balance to more available parking spaces for the number of cars that are present. However, by eliminating some of the cars that should not be there, maybe.
Well, I mean,
Linda?
We should also consider that not everyone will need a parking permit. Not every house will need.
That's right.
I don't need.
That's right.
My vehicles are off the street. Darius, you're muted.
I think one of the things we talked about last time, which I really liked, was this idea of a grace period of maybe a year where people can sort of come forward with how many permits they would need or would want, and maybe that helps us sort of gauge, what the actual need for. But I agree, it sort of kind of organically happens. I did want to also say that I'm a huge fan of the plate reader idea, and the cost that was sort of quoted, I think that's per year, that's a great sort of deal, and I think that would be really in favor of implementing some technology like that.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean,
I'd like us,
let me
Christian,
just,
let me interrupt. I'd like us instead to move beyond how many cars and how many parking spaces there are. I think if we try and collect that data, we're going to be here another year, quite frankly. And if we try and balance that all out, I think we're getting too deep into the details of this. I think we'd like to stay at not at a higher level and let staff do that once city council decides that they want to do it, if they decide they want to do it. That's the time to get into those details.
I just want to clarify. I'm not the way I started this question is to have a rough estimate. I'm not saying that we need to, work this out in an engineer way. I'm just saying it. I think Justin before had mentioned it, and Tomas has mentioned it, that in their school they had some sort of method to get a sense, and now with Google Maps, quite frankly, I could go in and do it myself. This is just a rough estimate, but I do disagree with you that this data point. I'm not saying it's going to determine everything, but it would be good to have. That's all I'm saying. But we could definitely move on.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, and I definitely did say that. Sorry, Tomas here, but I definitely did say that. But I quickly realized just how it wasn't as easy as I thought it was. So just throw that out there as well. That's my bad.
Tomas, could you repeat that again? I didn't quite catch all of it.
Oh yeah, I was just saying that how Christian mentioned that I did mention that I was going to try to look into getting the street capacity. And then I also had realized it wasn't quite as simple as I thought it would be. So that's why we don't have an estimate or something like that at the moment. But that's why I think that's why he mentioned my name just now.
Okay. All right. Okay. See if we can move on. I mean, we're already quite a bit of time just on guest parking. Let's see if we can. I agree with Belinda. We should maybe simplify it. And let me just throw something out as an idea that a household gets one guest parking permit or two guest parking permits that have to be renewed every day, but that's a good for 24 hours. And let's just say there's a limit of 15 or 14 parking days that a guest permit system is allowed. So that's one permit for a total of 14 days in the year, or two permits for 7 days each. Any thoughts on that? Yay, no?
I like that idea personally.
How did you come up with that? I don't understand how that figures in or why. I'm just curious.
Okay. So we've talked about maybe 1-2 permits. Okay. That fits into that. And I'm thinking, when people come to visit more than just for dinner, they might, I'm Irish, and there's an old Irish saying that guests like fish smell after 3 days. Okay. All right. So a week is a long time for somebody to stay, and that's a nice stay, but then, that's about it. But that, if a person comes to stay for once, then they can come several times during the year. Say, you could have people come for the weekend 14 times, say, something like that. That was my thought on that.
It was didn't you mention a daily renewable?
Right, up to a total of 14 guest permit days per year, and it could be with one permit for 2 days, and then 2 permits for 2 more days, which would get you up to 6 permit days, so on and so forth. And if this is all online, the computer calculates all of this and can actually tell the person, the resident, hey, you have, X number of guest permits left for the year, I mean, it's easy to calculate automatically.
Are there going to be any exceptions to that? I mean, for example, long-term visitors, my culture, people stay for a month or two,
Okay.
and
All right.
move in and live with you for a while. So I'm wondering if there's if someone contacted the city and said, my sister's going to be here for X number of weeks. I mean, could there be some leverage for that?
I think that, yeah.
Instead of, I mean, basically, I'm sorry, the dog. Basically, it makes sense what you're saying, but it also feels like there's no room to have long-term guests, and I know that can become a problem if people abuse it as extra parking for, their ADU or something like that. But I think there needs to be an exception in some way, Kieran.
Okay.
Is everybody driving that's a long-term guest? If someone flies in, do they even always have a car,
No, they
I
don't.
know we're not great for public transit, but we're not great for it, so it's not the best fallback, but there are some options. Or like, say in your case,
drive in, some people fly in, and I understand that, but my sister from Atlanta often drives here and stays weeks.
but in those kind of cases, you should get a permit and you put your car on the street and let her park in your driveway.
That makes sense. Okay.
Because you're allowed to.
I think one of the things we talked about several months ago, and with respect to the 2 permits per resident, and I think it applies to guest permits, there has to be some flexibility for things like what Linda just said. There has to be some flexibility for households that say have a kid in college that goes to a local school and has a car, and they have 3 cars, there has to be flexibility like that. And I think in that case, the resident contacts the city, whether it's, if there's going to be a parking department, or it's Brisbane Police, and get approval for these special kinds of conditions. I think there has to be that kind of flexibility. And I would trust it to whoever that person or those people are, that they are aware of the potential for abuse and would know how to prevent that. Does that make
might be
sense?
some information we want to get is, or just put it in their hands and let them tell us how it works. With permits, with guest permits, and Karen, you've got something to say.
Yeah, I think, I don't want to speak for the police, but I know that in a small town, people know the staff, they know the police, and I think on the staff side, one of the advantages of this was that it was going to be very automated, because I think there are always people that want the exception, and they're, the long conversations, and my case is unique. And I don't know that I have an answer off the top of my head. If, you have your permits, you need to park on the street, and you have someone visiting for longer than the time that the committee recommends or the council approves for guest parking, but, they could go park in front of Patrick's house on the ridge.
That's right.
I'm teasing.
We got a lot of room up here.
There are probably some ways around it, but I think we want to set up a program that there's always going to be something that doesn't work, but that doesn't have to be decided on a case-by-case basis by staff.
Okay. So how would you,
possible.
Karen, how would you phrase that?
I don't know. Commander Garcia, do you have any thoughts? You're the ones that get the calls with the rules don't apply to me.
So I think what Patrick said, that you're given, the program itself is built so that there are certain built-in features of it, like you get 14 per resident, or and guest parking. And then, like Linda said, let's say you have either a kid coming up from college for the summer and they're there for a month. I think there should be some like online submittal where it can take up to 7 days for approval before your guest gets here. So it puts the onus on you to notify us, notify the program first. I'm asking for an exception for this amount of time. We look at the facts, we get the information on the car and all that, and then they are granted that within 7 days, and either they're granted or they're denied. That way they can at least tell the guest, hey, I have a room for you, but I was denied parking. So we're gonna have to come up with a parking issue one way or another, outside of the built-in features of, visiting parking. Because there are gonna be those exceptions where, you do have, like, Linda said, you have a guest. Now, keep in mind, I do wanna make sure that everyone knows that even if you're given a 3-week exemption, because let's say you broke your leg and you need someone to come take care of you, they need to park the car in the street. That doesn't give you the ability to just park your car there and store it for 3 days. Our 72-hour rule based on the California Vehicle Code still applies. There's nothing we can do to take that out. So that alone is separated from this. So cars will still move. Cars will still have to fluctuate and keep moving. So that way, by no means, I don't think you guys should build a parking program where it's a storage program as well either, because they're entitled to spots. This is just a way to, keep vehicles moving, keep them fresh, and not stored, because most of our calls are cars that have been there for 2 weeks. Well, a parking permit should not give you that ability to park there for 2 weeks because I paid my $50 or $70 for the year. That's completely a separate issue. So I don't mean to digress because I know we've gone a lot of time, but yeah, I think there should be an exception where they send in a submittal and say, hey, this is what I need. Can it be granted or not? And those are my thoughts for that. Okay. Whether it be for sickness, home for the summer, or exigent circumstances, that can be granted by, it can be submitted through the program and then funneled to us for approval, just like a permit or like an encroachment permit, and we shoot it back and say, oh yeah, you've been given that permit.
I have I mean that's a good point, and I guess I have like a side question or comment. So if hypothetically speaking, if we do get this, we contract this company that has that Karen mentioned at the beginning, maybe that would be a good source that would sort of like flag out those cars that are staying more than 72 hours. Would that be part of their scope of enforcement?
No. So here's why I want to keep the 72-hour California Vehicle Code separate from this program, is because, like Patrick said, at 2 in the morning, everyone's settled in and they'll find parking, whether you give 2 permits or 3 permits, everyone finds parking. Now, there are streets we deal with that are not as harmonious as others. And you don't want a program where you're now going to shake up a street that had a perfectly good plan, because everyone's got their agreed kind of, hey, we don't keep streets, we don't use streets for storage. And if we were to use this program as a tickler saying, hey, this street has 5 cars that are, stored on the street. Well, we've always been a complaint-driven city. We don't want to lose that factor just because we adopt a automated license plate reading program. It's unfortunate, but there are some streets that we never get a call on because they agree.
Okay. Just to clarify, when I said 14 days, I didn't mean continuous. I was trying to set an annual limit to how many guest permits a resident could get. That was, okay.
And I think you're spot on when the system will track your address and it has a tickler. You ask for 2, you have 12 left. You ask for another 2, you have 10 left. So that way they can kind of self-monitor how many they're using as well. So,
okay.
Is this ready to be put into some sort of a motion?
Or at least reach a consensus. I don't think we're doing motions yet. Hopefully next month we will do motions. We'll summarize and do motions.
What's the word we used?
Yeah.
We need an acclamation of some sort if anybody wants to put all of this into it.
Well, something I was thinking about too with the 14 days, guest parking. I think that I think that kind of makes sense. And just kind of going to what you were saying, Linda, like we still got the 1, 2, or 3 permits, plus most of the houses in this area do have driveways as well. So they technically might even have another spot that they're already using that won't even count towards the permit parking program. So 14 days, I think, is actually almost pretty generous too, given they're already given 2 extra potential permits plus a potential guest parking, plus for not all, but for the majority of the area having the driveway. So I think that the 14 days, it seems like a good amount to say, okay, this is what we can give for that, and if there's exceptions, there can be exceptions, potentially, that are processed through however way is decided.
Thanks, Gregory.
Thank you. Let me see if I can summarize this. Guest parking program would be for a guest permits for a total of 14 days in a 1-year period. Permits would be for a max at any one, and on any given day, you could have a maximum of 2 guest permits. So you couldn't have 3, or if you couldn't have 14 and use it, your whole thing. Let me finish, Darius, and I'll come to you. So it would be maximum 2 permits at a time.
Can you change that to guest permits?
That 2 guest permits, yes, 2 guest permits, right? And ability or room for exceptions. And that just kind of covers the people coming for a month or whatever. Darius, you had your hand up?
Clarifying, is that per household or per permitted driver then? So for each household, can that then have 28 days total? Or would it be, how do we?
No, per household. So just like per household, we're giving 2 parking permits, then each household could have this single guest.
Yeah, thanks, yeah.
Okay. I don't know, what is everyone's thought on that? Any thoughts?
It makes more
Christian?
sense to me now. Yeah.
Okay.
So it sounds like, if we do go with the business that Karen mentioned, any vehicle that you enter in the system is going to have to pay a fee. So this guest permits, I think you're going to have to charge for them, right?
I didn't ask about that. I didn't ask about that. It's not going to be as much. So I think, yeah, that's maybe a last point that I can follow up, and then we could kind of figure out, you want to do the fees for that next time? And I can look into that.
Okay.
Sure.
Let me add one thing, because I like what Commander Garcia said. If you apply for an exception, there's a 7-day waiting period, so that people have to plan ahead. I would add that in as well.
You might as well add in the 72-hour need to move your car.
Well, that's already city law or state law or something, right? That's already on the books.
That's based on the vehicle code, so we keep that stays in place.
Okay, but if we're going to put this out as how it's written,
oh yeah, you can put something that it does not supersede a
References.
California vehicle code of 72-hour parking.
How would we say that? Must follow vehicle parking code or something?
Yeah, California vehicle code 72-hour rule. It doesn't supersede it. So that way, because when you think about parking permit program, you automatically kind of think, well, then that gives me the right to park there for as long as I can, as long as I have a permit. No, it doesn't. Vehicle code still takes place.
Right. But that applies to the primary permits also, right?
Correct.
Even though we're giving somebody a permit to park in front of their house, they still have to move that car within 3 days, right?
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Any thoughts? What do feel my head spinning, frankly.
So I was feeling. I think this is a lot smoother and easier where we're at now with the permits and how they can be used. And extenuating circumstances can be asked for, can't find my words, can be asked.
Exceptions.
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 Brain dead.
Okay.
Yeah, okay. And Mario, congratulations on being Garcia.
Thank you. No name change needed.
Darius, did you have your hand up?
No, but
Okay, well, I'm gonna go ahead.
No, I was
I'm
gonna
gonna
say-
call on everybody.
Yeah, no, I didn't have my hand up, but generally, I think this is a good, sort of outline like we talked about. So yeah, I'm in favor of this. Yeah. Not
But
much-
What do
Gregory,
you think?
Yeah, I know. I think the 14 days, an exception, with potential for exceptions, and I think it's okay to give them 7 days for approval of the exceptions, if that's the case for guest parking. I think it kind of fits with what the goal, our goals are eliminating the Uber parkers and the people with over 10 cars parked on the street. I think it kind of heads towards that goal.
I like how Commander Garcia phrased it, using the street for storage. I liked I liked how that was worded. Very, very neutral.
Yeah.
I just want to ask one more thing,
Okay.
just detail. If someone flies in and they rent a car, will that just be identified as staying at your address, or because you won't have the license plate number in advance?
Oh, that's a good question.
That happens occasionally here.
Well, if there's an
Yeah, that
online
happens
system,
with us.
if there's an online system or system you can call in, by the time they arrive to your house, you can definitely call in the system or put it in the system. And that, because you're going by license plate readers, that should automatically populate as fast as they can get it in. So
Okay,
I think you'll be safe on that aspect.
okay.
And I think given that we're also thinking about time frame of overnight, it kind of helps that too. If they come in the middle of the day,
Mhm.
they have 6 hours to get it into the system.
Absolutely.
Okay.
So,
Christian, what are your thoughts?
so just wanted sort of walk through your 7-day per year, suggestions. So saying, so the household will get either 1 or 2 guest parking permits, and then they're going to have 7 days a year, and then how they were going to say what time of the year? How do that work?
So,
14
um,
days.
Oh, 14 days.
they would get 14 guest parking days per year. And that could be 1 permit each time. Or at most, if they had 1 guest overnight, they could get at most 2 permits on the same day at any one given time. So if they're only using 1 permit at a time, they would actually get 14 days. If they were always using 2 permits at a time, they would only get 7 days because a permit each, right?
So what happens if you use your 7 days within 2 months of the year? Do you get another?
That's okay.
Another,
Oh, and then you need
don't
more
have it-
later?
yeah, you don't. So you're saying one guest parking permit covers 7 days, but then if you use that,
Oh.
then you buy another one?
No. But 1 day at a time. So let's say somebody comes to visit in January and they use 1 day. Then in April, somebody else comes and they use 2 days. You've now used 3 days out of your 14 days. That makes sense?
Yeah, I mean, just on national holidays, I think there's an average of 11 national holidays. I mean, so 7 days, you're falling short there. It's a little ambiguous, you know.
That's why my head is spinning. This could get so complicated.
But that only
Are-
applies to
are we
overnight
okay?
guests. Is that correct? It's only overnight guests that would require a pass.
Right. That's right. Linda, did you have anything to say or?
No, no. I'm good with what we've laid out so far. We may want to come
Okay.
back and look at it, but at this point, for expediency, I think we can come to an acclamation about this and move on. Does anybody else? Does anybody?
Any contrary thoughts? Okay.
I thought
Let's
the
move on to,
and Karen.
yeah, let's move on to the hours that this is in effect, because I think this is important. Last time we had talked about it would be in effect in the overnight period. And we really weren't sure. We talked about different start time, 5 p.m. or 6 p.m., because that's when people are coming home from work. Another thought was 10 p.m. or 11 p.m., because then that's after most guests have kind of departed. If people are over for dinner or drinks or something, they've kind of already gone, you know. And so it isn't, we don't need to worry about permits until later at night. Any thoughts on that, on the hours that this should be in effect?
I think last time I remember I was more thinking of 5 and 6, but the more I think about it, I think 10 p.m. Start time would be a little bit better.
Okay.
Just because of what you said, or what kind of just what we were talking about before, where it allows for dinner guests, and we're really thinking about the overnight parking. That is the main issue. And so if we're going to enforce it, we start enforcing it at like 8 p.m. or 7:30, let's say, but not everyone's left yet. Then we might start running into issues where someone gets a ticket, for example, for not having a permit at 8 o'clock, but they left by 9 o'clock, that day. So 10 p.m. seems like a reasonable time at that point, where gives people time to go if they're going to go, and the overnight parking is still there and available. And then enforcement after 10 p.m. You're most likely going to be overnight guests if you're there after that point.
Okay. Linda?
Devil's advocate. The commute seems to be an all-day thing these days. And I'm just wondering
Okay.
if people coming home early have some ownership, emotional ownership or whatever of the street parking, depending on their schedule. If you can get out there on the freeway at 2:30 and it's already getting bumper to bumper, or 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, it's worse. So I'm just wondering if it makes sense to, or how we can make this work for people. I realize not everyone's coming home at the same time, but is there a sense of ownership of a parking place when you have a permit?
I think people have a sense of parking in front of their houses, their parking space, even though that's not legally correct or legally
Right.
true, right?
Right. I just wanted to throw it out there, and
Okay.
I don't know that it matters, but it's a thought that came across when Gregory was talking.
Okay. Christian, what are you thinking?
I mean, I'm thinking 5, because a lot of people that work come back and they want to find a parking in front of their house. And also, if you're thinking about, more senior citizens, it's going to be uncomfortable, if somebody's parked in front of a house, has to go park far and then come back and park in front of the house after this time period gets into effect. So I think just to accommodate regular folks that work, 5 might be the way to go, in my opinion. Anyway, to put it to vote.
Okay. All right.
'Cause I was-
Darius, what do
I
you?
could respond to, yeah. I guess because I keep thinking back, depends what the issue we're trying to solve is. And if it's sort of the overnight parking and the massing of cars, yeah. I guess for me that's what the pain points were, which is why I think the overnight parking is, but then again, the cost is the opposite, which is not a factor anymore. And so if cost is not a factor, then yeah. Last time I think I was more ambivalent. This time I do feel more strongly that the evening is sort of the pain point. So I would lean toward a later start point. 5 does seem really early for me in terms of enforcement and guests and everything, and then hassle having to register everyone. But especially if it's a 2-hour window, then again all that discussion again. That's where I kind of come back to.
So you're leaning
I'm
towards
more
later
towards
in the
later
evening.
in the evening, 10 p.m., 8 p.m., something of that sort. I think 5 is very early in my mind. Unless the issue is that we have like an influx of business people and they're taking up street parking, something like that, which I don't think is the point we're trying to address here.
Okay. All right. Thank you. I guess my thoughts on this are the parking as it is at the moment. The permit program should, in terms of coming home at 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock, finding a place to park, the permit program should not make it worse than it is already today, right? The purpose of the permit plan is to free up additional parking spaces due to either on-street storage of vehicles or airport Uber people, right? So if it's later at night, I don't, having it in effect at 5 p.m., I don't think makes much difference. Okay. In terms of, because of, say, for example, a person who is storing vehicles on the street, if they've got to move it at 10 p.m., they're going to move it at 5 p.m. because it's light out, right? And they're going to get that vehicle off somewhere else long term anyway. So I'm kind of leaning towards the later, and same for the Uber people. They're going to simply not park there because they know they're going to get towed, a ticket or towed, whatever. For if it's, they're going to get a ticket for 48 hours of parking and towed for, they get towed now. So, but for 48 hours of parking, they're going to get a ticket, period. Whether they parked at 8 o'clock in the morning or 8 o'clock at night, they're still going to get a ticket. So they're not going to park there. So I think I lean towards more later in the evening. I kind of like a 10 o'clock time frame myself.
Yeah, I mean,
do you want? Go ahead.
So one of the reasons I mentioned that is because I do get a sense of the culture in my block, and my block probably represents a lot of other, blocks in the city. So it's more like a culture thing, because if I have to deal with it sometimes that I find people parking in front of my house and legally I cannot say anything, right? So then I have to go find parking space further, and then they leave. So if the rules of the game are, because now with this parking permit program, the rules of the games are going to be more clear. If they are in terms of, you could park anywhere, and then you could leave at 10, and then after 10 it's going to get enforced. So next thing you know, a lot of the folks here, the guests are going to be parking in front of the houses, and they know that after 10 they're going to move it, and then the actually residents, they're going to have to go get their vehicle and bring it back in front of the houses, and I know that's going to make a lot of people unhappy.
But is that any different than it is today?
What do you mean?
So if guests are parking in front of somebody's house today, is that any different than a permit program and they're parking in front of that same person's house at 5 p.m., say?
So that's why I was anticipating that with the rules of the game being more clear, people are going to feel entitled to park, you know, pretty much anywhere and say, hey, I'm just following the rules, right? And then after 10, you could, you know, then the parking program permit is going to be enforced, but for now, it's not. So I could park in front of your house. So that's what I'm anticipating.
So, but, right. But I mean, I I guess who would, okay, all right,
I mean, that's a possibility.
sure.
Yeah. So I don't know. I mean, that's just my sense in terms of reading the culture of my blog. And like I said, I assume there's other blogs with the same.
But do you find, I mean, to me, that's kind of a random person that might come park on any particular block, you know, and not be a resident there, right? And in which
No,
case, if it's a resident, they would have a permit anyway.
Well, because you know, in any particular block, you're gonna have people that have lived here for a long time, and then you're gonna have some houses that they have in and out renters, and those renters usually are the ones that are more, you know, socially active. So they're gonna have visitors, and that's what happens a lot of the times. And right now, the way it is, you know, it's just like a code of, I don't know, you could call it resident or street sort of way of dealing with parking. And then you talk to the, you know, so it takes a little bit for them to learn to get on board with the learning curve in terms of parking. And then they sort of get the picture, and then they tell their guests to go park at the streets where they have most park, right? Because so that's from the get-go. You're saying, you know, hey, so that's what I was also saying, that there should probably be some area designated as guest parking, so that could also help, you know, other people in this situation. And maybe those area they could go into 10 or whatever.
Okay. All right, Linda. Thank you, Kristen. Linda.
I politely disagree. We don't get to tell people where to park on the street ever. We don't own the street or the sidewalk or the curb depressions are not blocked. But as far as open parking, it's just catch as catch can. And I think a section for guest parking is confusing and adds a lot more to the mix than we want to deal with right now. And it'll pretty much be the same. It's just we're eliminating, I mean, parking with or without a permit now versus when we get them. It'll pretty much be the same. It's just we're eliminating some of the abuse that is taking place with the street. So I don't really think we need to add any more to it at this point.
Yeah, Linda Tomas here. I also agree with that. And I also just frankly, like you said, it all comes down to like, I mean, even if it is part of a culture, you can't tell it's someone that's my spot, you know, that's just, of course it'd be nice, right, but that's just not how it works. So.
Exactly. Thank you. I mean, I understand, Christian, what you're saying, and there is a culture on every street of where that's where she parks and that's where he parks. And, you know, you might even get yelled at for parking there, but technically it's legal. So I think we should stick with what we've got so far.
Okay. Do we have a consensus on timing then? Later in the evening, earlier in the evening? I mean, should we kind of take a vote on this at the moment, or
I'll go
not?
with
Or
I think a vote might be good. I'm hearing differing opinions.
Okay.
You know.
Why don't we say favor? I don't want to do a roll call vote. I just want an informal vote at this point. So maybe the two choices would be, say, I don't know, 5 p.m. and 10 p.m. Do those sound okay as choices?
Yes, to me they do.
Okay. So all in favor say starting the permit requirement at 5 p.m. Just raise your hand. Okay. One. Christian, okay. 10 p.m. Okay. Okay. What, 4? Okay. Okay. We are 8 o'clock point.
How much
At our
more
8
did you want
o'clock
to
or
cover?
stop?
How much more did you want to?
Well, I know we have a bit of staff reports and Darius report on his meeting out at the marina on the new park. The last thing I had was, do we include Visitation Street or not? How does it, staff, how are you, Karen?
I don't know that I have an opinion, but I thought we talked about this last time and you guys decided that you wanted to include it at night and keep its normal daytime procedure where it's kind of complaint
Yes.
based. Oh, but you
Yes,
didn't have
but
everybody here, so maybe you want
we
to
didn't have
revisit.
everybody here, right, right.
Okay.
So
Okay.
that was the thought for visitation. Daytime, leave it as it is, the 2-hour window and so forth.
Mhm.
But then I would, if we start at 10 p.m., at 10 p.m. to park on visitation, one would need a permit. That was
That's
the thought.
good. Yeah, that makes sense.
It's not end time. 6, 7
What's
a.m.,
that?
something like that.
Oh, end time, yeah, 7 a.m. That gives people time to get out the door. Christian?
Yeah, I think in terms of visitation, if you want to clarify, I'm assuming the business owners would be looked at as households, so to speak, and they would get a permit, right?
Do the
Well,
business owners park at their
I thi-
business overnight?
But I mean, some of them,
Bar, the Elks Club might. What time does the Elks Club close?
You mean the Eagles?
I mean,
I
the
think-
Eagles, right?
Yeah, I think they're open serving as late as 2 o'clock sometimes. Not sure, but that's my hunch about that. It's a private club, but it's also a pretty much a go-to bar for a lot of people.
Right, right, right. So that creates a problem, I think,
but
Right.
also, I mean,
for the business.
for the business, if you have a business vehicle that you want to park in front of your, business, and sometimes if you're going to work late, it doesn't have to be an overnighter. So I think they might need to, we probably need to think about how to get them with some sort of, more or less the same criteria that we're using for household, where they could buy parking permit and stuff.
Only
What
if
if we did this?
they're overnight or working late hours, it can be an exception.
Let me throw something out. And this actually kind of maybe solves the guest parking problem, is exclude visitation. Don't include it. That lets that lets the Elks stay open to 2 p.m. Have people there at 2 a.m., no problem. It lets business owners stay late or come early. And if run out of guest permit, put their car over there. And it cannot become a storage problem or an Uber airport problem because of the 2-hour limit during the daytime.
But that's a mixed area. There's regular residents there too.
Say that again.
On the street, you have residents, residential area. It's a mixed area. It's not just business.
At the upper end, I guess. Right.
No,
Yeah,
Some
all
are
the way
lower end
down.
too.
Yeah.
First block.
Lower end too.
The Eagles also have off-street parking though, don't they? For employees or whoever, I guess.
Not all of them. No, I think only Midtown has off-street parking.
So when I've been on visitation late at night, 10:30 a couple of times, there's
Always
almost no
empty.
cars there.
Yeah.
It's empty. If residents somewhere, they're not parking on visitation. I don't know where they're parking, but they're not. I mean, there's like 2 cars there, 3 cars at 10 p.m.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah, I mean, I can say
I
that
don't.
from my own experience, sometimes having to park there, it's empty completely at night.
Yeah. So, what is everyone's thoughts? Do we include visitation or not include visitation in the permit program?
Or do people want to think about it till next meeting?
I mean, that's a good point. A lot of the cities
Yeah.
that we looked at, they clearly had different rules for commercial. So
Right.
we might, so we might need to think about if we include them or not, or just treat them different.
Why don't we, since it's so late, why don't we defer a little bit? Let's defer this till next time. Okay. And this will be the last item we need to talk about. Then we can start summarizing next month, I mean.
I don't think we need to defer it, Pat. I think we need to decide whether it's in or out. And
Right.
And that's really the only decision. So if everybody is in agreement tonight, we can close this one up.
I got the feeling we were not. Should we take a vote, hand vote? Who thinks visitation should be in the permit program? Hold your hands up.
But let me,
Two.
let me say something before they vote. I mean, technically, because they do have some residents there, I don't think we could make the decision to exclude them or not. I mean, just because the street seems empty, they are residents in that street.
2 of them have off-street parking, and I think 3 of them do not, or 4 of them do not. So it's not that big a difference. It really doesn't make a big impact.
Again, it's not going to be a perfect program. It won't be a perfect. Again, we can't. Well,
I know you don't want to give some people, an out to come back and sue you, like from some. Oh, I do live here. This is mixed use. This is residential. And why are you excluding me? Why am I not getting? We have to be concerned about that.
It would be to their benefit. They would not need a permit. It would be to their benefit. They need to get a permit. They can just park there if they live there.
I think
It's
we should exclude
actually
visitation.
they're. I'm sorry, say that again, Linda?
I'm in favor of excluding visitation from the permit process.
Okay, so can we show of hands again who would include visitation? Who would exclude visitation? Okay, we'll come back to this.
Okay.
So we move on to the committee matters. Karen, did you have anything? Karen and Tomas?
Yeah, I have one. Patrick and everyone else, we've mentioned probably 3 consecutive months now about this project for Crocker Trail. I think it was the first time we're preparing it. The second is we just sent it, and now we sent it and we got word of approval for this project. So basically, long story short, just good news. They received all our documents, all our plans, our specifications for the project, and they thought it was good. So good news that we're moving forward on that.
Right.
And it'll probably be out to bid, Aaron, or advertised, I think in the spring, sometime in the spring. Who knows?
Fantastic.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you. Wonderful. Wonderful. Okay. Anything else, Karen or Tomas?
That was it for me.
I'm on mute and I've been talking away, so sorry.
I heard you. I was like, maybe she's talking to her cat. I don't know.
No. Probably advertise it in the winter, so we're ready to start right after the end of the rainy season.
Okay.
We've also got on, and you guys are probably the first to hear about it because we just found out this afternoon. We've also got on the council's agenda just an update on all the grants that we got. You guys should be familiar, except a couple people maybe missed last meeting. I can't even name all of them. I have to open the agenda report, but a grant to improve shuttle stops in Crocker Park. We also applied for a grant from the Transportation Authority. You know, when you guys vote for these extra sales taxes or transportation related funding, you know, they get distributed back to the cities, and we've done really well. And maybe Tomas is our lucky charm because he's applied, he's done the, you know, the grunt work and gotten us a couple. So we got one funded to Larry to Santa Clara walkway to finish that, and design money for the second piece, Santa Clara down to Alvarado, and for the walkway from San Francisco Street at the whatever end, south end of the park to Old County where the bus stop is. So things that you guys have prioritized in the past few years, and I guess I'm making that presentation to council, and I'm going to mention the letters of support from the community and the committees and the POA and all of that helped us with that. So we got a lot on the burners to try to get built in the next couple of years.
Fantastic.
That's great.
That's wonderful news. Congratulations.
Yeah, it's all of us.
Yeah, all
Very cool.
And I might have
anything-
mentioned before, I think at the state level, they're looking at the end of February is going to be the end of all remote meetings. I don't have a lot more information. I think we might be able to do hybrid, but we'll have more updates in January and February. But in March, there will be at least the option to be in person in the community meeting room, and I'll know more as we get closer.
Okay.
Okay. What are they basing that on? Sorry, what are they basing that decision on? COVID's not over.
I don't.
And
I guess the ability to treat it, maybe, and I'm not sure it's a state. You know, they suspended kind of the Brown Act requirement to meet in person and did this modification where people could call into a meeting, and at some point we knew it kind of had to end. But if a hybrid would mean that you can still be remote and the public could come in person to the meeting place and be also on the Zoom, you know.
If we all wanted to be remote, could we all be remote? Or does somebody have to show up at the chamber?
Well, staff would, but I think that's possible, and I will give you more when I know more, which would be hopefully January.
Well, I think that's great news. You know, I mean, nothing beats having a meeting in person.
It's great to meet in person, but I'm just not really convinced that we're out of the woods yet. So
I'm sure they'll allow hybrid meetings to continue, for sure. And there's a large enough, and I think the population that needs to be protected is now clearly understood, right? And I think they'll probably continue to allow that part of the population to be protected, and I think that. So I'm sure hybrid meetings will probably continue.
Thank you. Thanks, Karen.
Yeah.
So that's all we have.
Anything else? Okay. Darius, could you update us on the Marina Park project?
Yeah. So we had one meeting of I guess it's the Sierra Point subcommittee for the open space and parks for that development of the area by the marina. And so just to give you a sense, it was a walkthrough of the site with the consultants who are leading the project. And the first phase was sort of the research phase, which they had completed. There was one meeting prior to this that I did not attend, or maybe two meetings, where they sort of set the scope for the project. And this time they came back with a packet, which is available on the website, you know, with the agenda and everything. But they sort of came in with, you know, some description of the geography of the area, some of the ongoing projects, because there are ongoing developments that are, you know, happening and will happen soon. And the whole scope is sort of a 50 and 100-year plan. So I guess the idea is to have like a long-term plan, a long-term vision, and then this could be a phased approach. It's still really early in the process. At this point, there was some suggestions of sort of, the next, I guess, deliverable will be the committee or the consultants will come back with a couple of design suggestions. So in the last meeting, they presented a few sort of big picture ideas of zones, if you will. So sort of a play zone or a one idea was a beach or a waterfront zone and sort of different regions, but nothing yet set. And so it was sort of how to think about the whole area and sort of what the requirements for parking might be and for sort of the community for access to that area. So all of that is being considered still. And the next, like I said, the next thing will be sort of proposals of just general ideas of what might be included in that area. And this is all based on surveys that have gone out to the community as well. So I think they're taking sort of all the surveys in, sort of, we'll come back with a few suggestions of what could be there based on the feedback. And then from there will be sort of another round of feedback, and sort of iterations, if you will. But this was, again, a walk through the site, and then we sort of sat through, looked through this master plan they suggested. The big consideration is the water rising, obviously, and sort of what that means. And, there was one idea or a couple suggestions of, do you want to make it, sort of a public park with a more art design? Is it something that is sort of designed to just kind of let, the water take away as time goes on? And these are all considerations that, I think will sort of be discussed and so are ongoing. Nothing really, this was very early still in the process.
How long is the project scheduled for?
I'm not sure about that yet. Yeah, I didn't get a sense of that exact timeline. Okay. I know the next deliverable will be sort of, like I said, the first initial sketches of what could be there, but then there is sort of gonna be an outreach phase again and sort of more additional, so I think it'll be quite a long process still. But I can follow up on that, yeah.
So,
Okay.
I mean,
Are
in terms
they
of,
with
Christian?
yeah, so I was,
oh,
I guess my question would be in terms of the sea level rising, there, I mean, the short, that area by Redwood City of Redwood Shores, I think it's called. I mean,
yeah.
they ended up doing some serious levee over there.
Yeah. So I guess the
So
considerations around that, yeah, there's sort of projections of what the rises will be over sort of 50 years, 100 years, that sort of, scale. And the consultants were, they had the data, and the package shows some of the diagrams of what it could look like. These are, again, projections. And so there are certain structures there that are currently there, like the Harbor House and the Yacht Club, and those that are sort of maybe in the danger zone. And so the consideration is sort of what to do with those structures in terms of, or more like the sheds there or the bathrooms long term. And then, whether you have a promenade there, the option is for retaining wall sort of structure. But of course, depends how far out to build that because water will get around. So those are all sort of, I think part of that's already developed further upstream, and it's all sort of in this scope and projections and all that. So they are aware very much of sort of the projected water rises. And I do encourage you to check the packet out. That was very informative for me. I was not aware of sort of king tides and where water already comes to. And so sort of if you're familiar with the area, the lower part, that does tend to flood already. So that's sort of in the danger zone. And so sort of the bathrooms there, they're at a high enough elevation, but there's also considerations for example, the marina docks currently are not up to code. So in terms of the angle for accessibility. And so any sort of renovations there would require significant renovations along the promenade there, the marina area. And so there's, considerations of what to do up front versus 10 years versus, further down the line, bless you. Sort of all ongoing conversations.
Oh, pretty cool. Very concerning though.
yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and it was, for me personally, it's shocking to see the tree line. A lot of the trees there's already saltwater damage from the water coming up into the trees, and so consideration for what kind of plants and sort of a Florida place there, whether making more natural habitat or what to do there. That's sort of all being discussed.
Wow, good presentation.
Yeah. Any discussion on traffic circulation or road realignment or pedestrian walkways and bike paths and such?
Yeah, this was sort of out of this.
Or is that too early? Okay.
No, I think it was also sort of out of this. There's discussion sort of about connection to main town, right? If you're going to encourage so the idea was, do you want to build something there to encourage sort of commuting and sort of usage out in the marina? And so that is like, how do you connect? And that's also part of, I think, the grand plan and just sort of different phases of that. Yeah, but that was sort of one. I think there are also new buildings going up there. I guess a hotel that's planned for the area. That's sort of very early phases as well. So I think that'll all depend on, I think a lot of commercial area there that's sort of still open and not yet rented out. So yeah, definitely all considerations there. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Does anyone have anything else to add tonight, or we've had a long meeting? I will take the silence as a no. I think we are completed for tonight. Our next meeting is January 4th next year. Could I have a motion then to adjourn the meeting?
So moved.
Second,
I'll second that.
all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Commander Garcia.
Thanks, guys. Happy New Year.
Happy holidays to
Happy
everyone.
holidays,
Happy
Happy
New
New Year.
See you all in the new year. Happy New Year. All right.
See y'all in the
Thank
new year.
you.
Thank you.
All right.